Emergency, emergency. Houston, we have a problem. Or maybe in this case it's Brussels. The EU is about to enact something that's really dangerous for AI. What they're trying to do is to stop countries and individuals from releasing any kind of AI add-ons, like any kind of models basically, unless they get to see it first and they get to decide whether that model is good enough or not. Good enough meaning that it doesn't have any licensed material, break any of their rules, it doesn't do something that they don't deem fit, etc. Now the issue, while that all might sound okay, the issue is that those things take a lot of time. What it ends up doing is stifling innovation. Because of the length of time it takes to check every model and the cost, you wouldn't have open software anymore in the sense that we have it today, because a lot of these guys that are making these models would not be able to release them. Anything that they see on GitHub or on any website would make the developer liable and fined in the EU for whatever they released, or even if you used it, you would be liable in the EU for releasing that software without having it first checked and approved by the EU. And if you break that rule, you could be subject to up to $20 million in fines. That seems like really extreme. And this rule would be extraterritorial. It means that it would cover the whole of EU, and not every country would be able to have their own rules regarding this. And countries would not have a say. They would have to abide all of them. And if an individual within a country doesn't abide by that rule, the country itself could be liable. Which means that a lot of the models you see, such as Auto GPT, anything that's taken out of GPT, or that's using the GPT API to create more software, different kinds of software, would be extremely stifled, if not banned, as well as any models that you see in Stable Diffusion, anything using Midjourney, and any AI software that we're used to. This really sets a dangerous precedent. And the worst part is, the reason they give for this is environment and democracy, saying that not checking these models or allowing all these models to be done as open software would be a threat to democracy and the environment. Let's delve a little deeper here. Let's take a look at this. First of all, the jurisdiction is extremely broad because they leave it open. They don't make any precise judgment. They just say that it's a threat to democracy and the environment, and that they're going to have to check and decide. So they'll have to check and decide every single thing. Here they say that open source LLMs are not exempt. This includes obviously ChatGPT, Bard, and all these softwares that are the chat softwares, and they are essentially banning APIs, just like we said a bit earlier, and this is extremely bad. Open source developers would be liable. In the United States, this would be an infringement on freedom of speech, but in the EU, they can do it. This also means essentially that the LoRa's would be banned. All of you Stable Diffusion users know about LoRa's. The LoRa is a technique to slowly add new information and capabilities to a model cheaply. Open source projects use it as they cannot afford billion-dollar computer infrastructure. Major AI models are also rumored to use it as training in both cheaper and easier to safety check than new versions of a model that introduce many. What's this going to lead to is just a few big players controlling everything in AI. Therefore, companies like Google, Microsoft, and the big boys are going to have a complete monopoly, because the little guys, the little developers, the open software developers will not be able either to afford the time or the cost to have all the small models that they make checked by the EU and approved by them, which would take probably months and cost a ton. It's open software, so it's free. They don't have much to gain. So all of this is pushing the whole AI narrative into the hands of the few, of the big companies, who can then release whatever is right in their opinion, who can agree with the politicians, who can lobby these politicians, right? Put money in the pockets of these politicians. So it's basically making AI out of reach for us and giving it all to the big companies, to a few big companies that are going to control everything. This is exactly what we did not want. Jeremy Howard here says that any model made available in the EU without first passing extensive and expensive licensing would subject companies to massive fines greater than 20 million euros, or 4% of worldwide revenue. Open source developers and hosting services such as GitHub would be liable. So they know they cannot control the AI when it's spread out, which is the point. It's supposed to be completely decentralized, but they want to have full control of it. So what they do is they push it in the hands of a few big boys that they can control or agree with or get paid by. This seems to be the goal here. It is very sad, and apparently it seems like it's going to pass. Here we have our friend Imad Mostak, who's the founder of Stable Diffusion. He says this is concerning, but we will put in place systems to allow for open model releases via us. It is suboptimal as it would entrench our status, which, while good for business, is bad for innovation. He doesn't mind too much because he's going to be responsible for all the models that are being released. So they're going to be in-house models, but that just means that the rest of the people are not going to have the opportunity to create models and share them with the communities. What you're seeing now everywhere on multiple websites like Civit AI and on Reddit and on all these websites, all these would be subject to being fined, banned, or closed. They are effectively creating a monopoly out of AI. This would be the worst case scenario. And again, it looks like this bill might pass. Let's see some other reactions here from CNBC. It is worrying to see that broad categories of useful AI applications which pose very limited risks or none at all would now face stringent requirements or might even be banned in Europe. Boniface de Champry, policy manager at CCIA Europe, told NBC. MEPs have now introduced all kinds of amendments that change the very nature of the AI Act, which now assumes that very broad categories of AI are inherently dangerous. So as you can see here, people are very unhappy. This is the tech industry reactions. The experts had something similar to say. The long-arm reach of the proposed AI rules inherently means that AI players in all corners of the world need to care. Savova told NBC via email. The right question is whether the AI Act will set the only standard for AI China, the US, the UK, to name a few, after defining their own AI policy and regulatory approaches. So a lot of people are worried that, since it is kind of worrisome, they're worried that this might affect the whole of the world if it doesn't get any pushback in Europe. So hopefully there will be a lot of pushback in Europe before this bill passes, because if it does pass and people get accustomed to it and other countries see that this has gone okay, they're going to try to apply it in their own countries. And we're going to see AI completely leave our hands, leave open development, and go into the hands of a few companies that will control everything regarding AI. We do not want that. I was really disappointed to read this. What do you think? Do you think this is all right? Do you believe them when they say that they're doing this for the good of the people, to protect us from bad AI? Or do you think, like me, that maybe this is all a plot to have full control on AI and be able to control the output of AI, and perhaps also get their own interests in their special interests? Let me know what you think in comments. Fingers crossed that it doesn't go through. Let's continue exploring AI and models and all these other things while we still can.